So I've been playing Autopsy Simulator, which is a brand new indie horror game that just came out. And after playing it for several hours now, and uploading a first impression video about it, I think I was a little too nice to it, considering it was an indie game. And I was a bit too lenient about it, because I thought I was in the early tutorial section of the game. But it turns out, no, that's just how the entire game is. And I can't in good faith recommend this game at all, because it is absolutely dog shit. For those of you who don't know, Autopsy Simulator is a game that was billed as a simulator where you'd be performing autopsies and solving mysteries about how people died, right? Sounds like a fucking great premise. Unfortunately, that's not what the game is at all. The actual game has you doing that, but on a much lighter scale, and it seems more focused about telling a story about a guy who misses his dead wife because he complains about her to an obnoxious degree, okay? Like, it's one thing that he has so many pictures of her literally everywhere where you can't play the game without seeing a picture of her somewhere, right? Like, that was bad enough. But it's really freaking jarring when I'm cutting open someone's head and slicing their brain open to see if there's any internal bleeding, and the dude's crying about missing his wife midway through out of nowhere, completely unprompted. And I had absolutely zero interest in the story they were trying to tell, because I got this game for the mystery detective aspect of, solving murders and how people died by doing autopsies on them, and it was billed as being well researched and realistic, right? And I'm willing to be lenient about graphics because it's an indie game and it's not being sold at full price, so I'm willing to give them that. But the gameplay is so bad. I thought it was the tutorial section where it just handholds you all the way through it, but the truth is, the entire game is just very linear and there's no choice, or it's impossible to get things wrong in the game because there's only one option for you to pick. And you're essentially just repeating the same mini games over and over again. In fact, some of them don't even have animations. So there'll be like entire animations for cutting someone open. When it comes to removing their ribs just suddenly pop out of existence when you click on them. I even found some very frustrating glitches and bugs in the game. So whenever you use a centrifuge, if you look at your notepad to see what settings to put it at, you can't click back on the centrifuge unless you click off it and exit out of it and then go back into it. And it was minor things like that that added up and really ruined the experience for me. But I want to use this as a talking point for just horror games in general. I am a massive fan of horror games. I love Resident Evil 2 Remake, Alien Isolation, Fatal Frame, and anyone who's into horror games can attest to the fact that there are a lot of crap horror games. Like, it's a niche genre, there's not many games in the genre, which means a lot of the games that get churned out for it tend to be absolute trash. Because they know people are so starved for these games, they'll buy it, but also there's like a subcategory of people who play bad horror games, mainly to react to them on YouTube, and that's not really my vibe. I like playing genuinely scary horror games. I'm pretty sure Autopsy Simulator will find a group of people who like watching streamers sort of react to the whole cheap horror game type aesthetic, right? I know Five Nights at Freddy's essentially made that an entire thing. And it's a popular subgenre, I'm not knocking it, it's just not for me. And the game did give me the initial impression that it was trying to be a realistic simulator, even though it looked kind of rough around the edges, and I was willing to forgive it if that's all it was. But it doesn't get any deeper than that. Like, there is no actual investigating at all. All you're doing is just clicking whatever options in front of you, because there isn't even a multiple choice section where you can choose anything. You just pick the choice that the narrator tells you to pick. And I just find that incredibly frustrating. It's not a good game to play, and unfortunately, with the state of how horror games are, it's just something we have to get used to, I guess. Because ever since the success of games like Five Nights at Freddy's, loads of smaller, I don't even want to call them indie developers, they're more like grifters, to be honest. I've been trying to churn out as much shovelware as I can in the jump scare horror genre, hoping that some YouTuber will find it and then make content about it and go viral, and then everyone will be in on it. And then if you look at like PC horror games now, 80% of the games you'll find under the horror category are just really cheaply made shovelware. There's no other word for it. They're all hoping to be the next Five Nights at Freddy's. They're not actually genuinely interested in making quality horror games. In fact, the last time I can remember playing a really good independent horror game would be World of Horror, and that was inspired by Junji Ito and his manga artwork. And it's probably the only horror game in the recent few years I can actually honestly recommend. Because outside of Resident Evil, everything else that's come out has been absolute just dog shit, really. There's no other word for it. And I feel really cheated by Autopsy Simulator trying to advertise itself as a realistic horror game, because that premise was good and I could do with a game like that. Like, you don't need to have something supernatural or some horrific dream sequence or whatever, or some hallucinations to make a game scary. Like, legitimately, if Autopsy Simulator was actually a very realistic simulator of performing autopsies, that creep factor of, like, realistic sort of like cutting someone open that alone would be all the horror element you'd need, and the mystery of investigating how people died. That would have been the best hook you could ever get. In fact, you wouldn't even need anything else if that was all the game was. Unfortunately, it's neither of those things. And I can't even bring myself to finish it. This is like a 4 hour long game. Like, I can't bring myself to play it for that long. If you look at this game's Steam page as well, you'll notice that it's mostly got mixed reviews, with a lot of very negative reviews coming in about how the game is absolutely nothing like it advertised itself to be. Instead, it is just a very linear game. And a good number of people are saying they're just going to refund the game. Look, I got this game with a discount, and I still feel cheated out of my money for this. And I'm someone who loves to support indie developers, and I'm more forgiving towards indie devs when games aren't looking like the most polished AAA experience, right? But considering how much time they had for this game and how much they delayed it, disappointment isn't even the word for it. But instead, I am going to give you some better horror games you can spend your money on. Starting with this game called World of Horror, which was actually made by one person, and all the artwork was done in MS Paint. It's a point-and-click roguelike, so very similar to like a really old school point and click adventure game with turn-based combat. It's a very simple game, but less is more, and it works so well. Just look how fucking good that trailer looks. I think stock black and white manga aesthetic was just incredible, and it works so well. Like, I played the game, and honestly, I felt like the price it was being sold at made me feel like I was cheating the developers out of money because of how good it was. To the point where I was considering getting this again. In fact, I did buy it multiple times. I bought it more than once because I wanted to give them more money for it. But it's such a fucking great game. I don't want to show you too much of it because seeing the really cool designs is part of the charm about this game, and I want you to experience it for yourself. But it essentially plays like a old school point and click adventure game, and the roguelike aspect is that you have to try and stop an elder god being summoned by solving a series of mysteries before it arrives. And each new run, you pick your character, you pick your skills, and you pick which god you're up against. And if you're playing the PC version, there's actually an active modding community where people have made their own characters and stories, and it looks fantastic. So this is one I very strongly recommend. Another one I recommend, sticking to the same theme of a visual novel style game and, Japanese horror specifically, this is one called Deathmark, or Spirit Hunter Deathmark. And this is also one of my favorite games. In fact, I believe the studio that made this are currently working on a Silent Hill game called Silent Hill F, which is a Silent Hill game set in Japan. But this is a game that's got some amazing artwork, especially when it comes to the monsters. Just the art and the music alone is 100% worth playing this game for. The story is sort of bare bones. Essentially, there are people who have these curse marks on them, and those people are going to die before sunrise unless you manage to stop the spirit that's cursed them. So you investigate the story of these spirits, and you can either put them to rest, or you can exorcise them, which is the more violent option. So you sort of have the option of doing things pacifist, non-pacifist, I guess. And it's one I genuinely... In fact, I think it was one of the very first games I streamed when I started streaming on Twitch. And just one more game I might as well recommend, probably the most popular one you guys probably know about, is The Quarry by Supermassive Games, who have done Until Dawn and the Dark Pictures Anthology. I think this is their best game they've ever put out. I know, as much as it might not matter to me, I know for a lot of people graphics will matter a lot, and this is a very good looking game. I think it's the best story they've put out as well. So if you ever play only one game by Supermassive, I think it should be this one. But if you ever played like a narrative game, like a Quantic Dream game like Heavy Rain or Detroit Become Human, or even just a Telltale game like the Walking Dead series, you'd be very familiar with the sort of thing. It's a lot of quick time events and dialogue choices and branching story paths. Great cast of characters, all acted really well. If you want the more cinematic horror type game, and I'm trying to give more recommendations for things that people might not have played or might not have been as, well known as something like Alien Isolation or Resident Evil clearly is. I think this is the one that's slightly more niche. But I imagine anyone's into horror games has probably already played this one. But yeah, I'd strongly recommend this one as well. Anyway, that's my little side rant about horror games purely because I have such a passion for the genre, but I don't like how much fans of genuine horror games kind of get shafted because... And I don't even want to call them developers because they're not actually developing games. They're trying to rush out as many products as possible because they want to become the next viral trend. And we're just having to deal with a wave of shovelware every single year, hoping for that one good game that comes out. I think the most recent one I can think of that came out was the Dead Space remake, which is actually a remake of a previous game. And in fact, I don't think that game's getting a sequel either because it didn't sell as well as the studio was hoping it would sell. So long story short, it really sucks if you're a fan of horror games because we are not eating good, are we? I think that's just my rant over that game, Autopsy Simulator. I've forgotten the name of the game I'm even reviewing right now because it's that bad. It just left me so disappointed when I had such high hopes for it. Even then, I was willing to be lenient to it for being rough around the edges, and it still let me down. And I just had to get my thoughts out there. But yeah, comment below if you have any horror game recommendations for me. I'm more than open to hearing them because I am always looking for new ones. And check out some of my other videos. I stream on this channel as well, so feel free to pop by and say hi whenever I'm live. I'm working my way up to 1,000 subscribers still, so please do hit that subscribe button. It would really help me out quite a lot. And hopefully I'll see you next time. So, see ya, Nara.